Hi, my name is Adam. I'm going to be talking in this video about the Dremel rotary tool. I have two Dremels here. It's two different models. Dremel just happens to be the brand that I have and that the library actually has in its learning labs for customer use. And there's many different brands, but Dremel probably is the most common. And there's many different accessories that you can purchase to go with them. It does many different things. It's a very versatile tool. We could be here all day if we wanted to talk about all of them that are available, but I just have some basic ones, and we'll talk about each one in a little more detail. First though, let's jump in and look at them up close, the rotary tools, and talk about safety. Okay, so what does the Dremel do and what doesn't it do? Well, as I mentioned, it's very versatile. Over here you can see that we have drill bits, so it can drill. There's these carving bits. I don't have a lot of those. They come in many different variations, but these are just a couple, just for example's sake. It can cut metal and plastic. These are cut-off wheels. It can grind both, glass, ceramic, and metals. That's what these two different colored grinding bits are for. It can sand. It comes with sanding drums and these replaceable sanding wheels that you can buy and sanding discs. And it can clean, it can polish. Over here you see some wire brushes and some of these polishing wheels and polishing compound. And this is another cutting bit. This one actually is kind of a spiral shape. It cuts in a sideways motion. So for cutting drywall, for example, if you were installing an electrical box. But it isn't a replacement for its full-size counterparts. Although it does things like grinding and sanding and drilling, it doesn't replace something like a full-size drill like this for a lot of different projects because it just doesn't have the torque or the capacity to do that. So let's look at the Dremel a little bit more closely. This one is actually my personal model. It's the Dremel 300. It's a little bit smaller than the one that the library owns. And it's pretty simple to operate. You have a switch here for adjusting the RPMs. It goes up to 35,000 RPMs. Over here is this button is kind of a clutch that you hold down when you're changing the bits. And to change the bits, it will come with this piece. This is called a collet, this piece right here. And your bits will fit down in it. And then when you tighten this over it, it will kind of clamp down on it. So that's how you change the bits. Let me just put one on just to show you. So it just threads on here like that, and you can hold this button to depress that while you're tightening this. And then you just put the bit in and finish tightening it like that. And then you want to give a final tightening with this wrench. Yes, this wrench actually does serve a purpose that it comes with. So just tighten it one last time, and then it's ready to be used. Now, safety. Anytime you're changing the bit, make sure that your Dremel is unplugged. The last thing you want to happen is you're changing this to accidentally hit this button and turn the power tool on. And it's going to be a really bad day for your fingers if that happens. So make sure it's always unplugged. Always wear safety glasses anytime you're using any power tool, especially one like this. And then you're pretty much all set. A couple other things to keep in mind is it's rotating while it's on. Never set it down because you don't want it to go, grab something and fly off the table or injure somebody. Also, just in general, after you're done using these bits, they're going to be very hot. So don't grab them with your bare hands. Let them cool down for a little bit before you change them. So those are just some of the basics of the safety. You'll also, of course, want to read your user manual when you get one or before you use one to make sure that you fully understand all of the safety. All right, so let's talk about some of the cleaning and polishing bits. So over here I have a few different brush attachments. This one is a nylon brush. It is more for cleaning soft surfaces like rubber or plastic. It's not going to do so well with cleaning metals. That's really not what it's intended for, more like softer materials. These wire brushes are made out of steel. These are for cleaning, primarily for cleaning rust off of steel and other harder metals, not softer metals. They do make some brushes that are brass, which are for softer metals so that it won't abrade the surface of the metal. And then, in addition to cleaning, you have polishing wheels. These are just felt wheels that you can attach using this, which is called, this is called a mandrel. There's different variations of this, but this type has a threaded end, and you just screw this onto your polishing wheel like this, and then you just put it in the Dremel tool, like we mentioned. You just put it in the collet, tighten it down, and then give it one last tightening with your wrench. Safety glasses on. And then lastly, we'll plug it in. It is in the off position. And what I'm going to show you in a moment is how to polish, just for demonstration's sake, this penny, which is kind of oxidized. I'm going to use some of this polishing compound that comes with the Dremel to show you just how it can clean something like this. So go ahead and have it plugged in, and I'm going to actually hold on to this penny with a pair of pliers so my fingers aren't in the way. And what you can do is just rub some of this polishing compound onto the polishing wheel, and okay, so hopefully you can see this, but the penny, all of the oxidation where I just polished that is removed. So depending on what you're working on, it works very well for cleaning metals like this, softer metals. All right, so next I'm going to talk about the grinding and cutting bits. So grinding, there's two different types of bits that the Dremel makes. There's the aluminum oxide, which are these orange stones, and they are intended for metals. And then the silicon carbide, which are these turquoise colored bits, are intended for glass and ceramic grinding. And by grinding we mean, of course, removing material. So for example, if you wanted to deburr something, I don't know, for example, if a door handle had a sharp edge on it or something like that that's metal, you could use one of these aluminum oxide grinding stones to remove that. So just to demo this on a piece of metal, I have a couple of scrap pieces here. And again, my Dremel is unplugged for safety. And we'll just go ahead and put the bit in, tighten it down. And again, I'm pressing down on this clutch here so that it doesn't rotate freely as I'm doing this. And then give it one last tightening. And as I am using this, you'll be able to see where it's removing some material from this piece of metal. And depending on what kind of metal you're using, you'll get kind of some sparks, kind of a light show. If you're using steel, like this binder clip is made out of, you'll see that in just a moment. So let's go ahead and plug in, and I'll demonstrate this. Okay. Okay, and maybe you can see this. That's not the most beautiful sound in the world, I know, but it just removed a little bit of the metal here. So if that were a sharp edge, for example, it would have removed that for us. Now, so here's the binder clip. It is made out of steel, so it's going to have some sparks as I'm using this. And again, I'm going to use my pair of pliers here to kind of grab it with. Okay. That's kind of fun. But yeah, depending on the type of metal. And again, you do want to be careful. It's going to be hot because of the friction that it generates when it's doing this. So I'm not actually going to touch that right away. So that's those are the grinding stones. Now you also have these attachments, which are intended for cutting metal or plastic. This one is actually a metal cutoff wheel. For example, if I wanted to remove these, cut them off, I guess you could do that, or a bolt sticking out of something, for example. Anytime you might want to cut a piece of metal tubing, that's another example where you might use something like this. This is also another cutoff wheel, type of cutoff wheel. This one is the same thing except that it's intended for plastics. And the way that you attach these to the Dremel, let me unplug this. It comes, this particular cutoff wheel comes with these easy change mandrels like this. So once you have this mandrel in the collet and tighten it down, it just has this collar that slides up and down like this. You just pull that down, and then this cutoff wheel has got a cutout for this shape. You just line it up, twist it, and let that go, and that snaps into place, and it's very easy to change these cutoff wheels. And then you're ready to go. And then the other type of cutting attachment I want to talk about is this spiral bit. It looks like a drill bit, but it's not intended for drilling. It actually cuts in a sideways fashion. So, for example, cutting out an electrical spot and drywall for an electrical box. And you can attach this to the end of the Dremel to make that a little bit easier. Let me just show you that. To put the spiral bit on first, I believe. Okay. Okay. Tighten that down. Okay, yeah. So this fits over this, and then this tightens down like that, just screws on, it's threaded. And then you can adjust this to the height that you want, the depth that you want, and then you just tighten down this set screw. And now what you can do is if you have a flat surface like drywall, you can just kind of work your way around in whatever shape that you need to cut that out. So this just helps stabilize it a little bit. So those are the cutting and the grinding tools. So next, let's look at the drilling attachments. So for this segment, I'm going to be using the larger of the two Dremels that I have, the Dremel 4000, which is actually the libraries. We have these in our learning labs for customer use. There's a couple different styles of drill bits. I'm going to be using these with the Dremel workstation, which is also in the learning lab. This is nice because it adds more versatility to the Dremel. You can use it as a mini drill press. You can rotate this and add different attachments like the grinding bits, for example, to use it as kind of a mini bench grinder or a mini sander if you want to use the sanding wheels with this. So for drilling, there's two different styles of bit the Dremel offers. There's the ones for wood, which have the guide points on the end so that it guides it into the wood, it doesn't walk around. And then this style, which is for this type, which is for metal and plastics. So I'm going to be demoing the wood ones right now, and I'm just going to take out the smallest, which is an 1/8 of an inch drill bit. You can use the drill bits with the collet that comes with the Dremel, although you'll need to swap out to a larger size collet to accommodate the larger shank on this drill bit. What I recommend is the chuck attachment that allows you to easily switch out drill bits and other accessories without having to swap out the collets. And it just screws on just the same as the collet does. You just press the little clutch button at the front and tighten this on, and then you can install the drill bit like this. Finish tightening it by hand. Oops. Finish tightening it by hand, and then give it one last turn with the wrench, and then it's ready to use. Now you can drill free-handed with this, but I don't really recommend that. I think I would prefer to use an actual handheld drill for that, just because there's a risk of breaking the bit if you're not careful. I really like, with the Dremel, I like drilling with this workstation and using it as a drill press. So let me show you how to set this up. And the smaller Dremel that I had or have would work in the workstation as well, but this one I'm using right now just because it has a little bit stronger motor, it's larger. So I actually have already removed the collar from this, and as you can see, it's threaded. And let me turn this so that you can see this little kind of basket that it fits in is also threaded. So you just put this in here, install it like this, start screwing this down. And there's a bigger wrench that comes with the workstation. And you just give that a final tightening, like that. And then I'm going to install the chuck. Just like a larger drill, it has jaws that, as you tighten it, it clamps down to grab the shank of the drill bit. Finish tightening it by hand. And again, I'm depressing this clutch button here that keeps it from rotating. Give it one final tightening with the wrench, and then we can put this back into position to use it as the drill press. There's a couple of places to snap the power cord into place here so you don't accidentally cut it as you're drilling, and then you're all set. So let's take a look at the drilling function up close. Okay, so it's set up for the drill press function. With this, you can adjust the depth that it's drilling using this set screw here. There's a ruler here, and depending on where you adjust it, you can go all the way until it bottoms out, or you can just drill partially into the workpiece. For example, with this pegboard game that I was working on, I didn't want to go all the way through the piece of wood, only partially. So I've set it so that it stops before it goes through. All right, so let's put the workpiece on. I have the Dremel workstation clamped onto the table. You do need to do that so that it's stationary. With wood, drilling wood and these wood bits, you want to use a higher RPM. If you were drilling metal, you would use a lower RPM and likely an oil of some sort to keep the temperature down. But with wood, you use the higher RPMs. So let's go ahead and start, and I'll just demo how this works. All right, so as you can see, just drilled this hole to the depth that I wanted. You do want to wait a moment before you attempt to change the bit if you want to, because it's going to be a little bit hot, and the more you drill, the hotter it's going to get. That's how you do that. Now, if I want to convert this into like a little mini stationary sander, I just unplug that. So I'm going to rotate this around, tighten this, and I can replace the drill bit, and I can still use the chuck for this. I can replace the drill bit with the sanding drum. So let's do that. Tighten this down. Okay. All right, I'm going to leave that in its sideways position, plug it back in. And with this now stationary, you have a lot more control over sanding the workpiece. I'm going to slow this down just a bit. So that can be useful, especially if you're sanding something that's got a curve or is rounded. It allows you just to kind of go with the motion of the wheel instead of having to try to freehand it. So it just the workstation just adds a little bit more versatility to this, and it's definitely a accessory worth having. All right, so sanding and carving attachments. Let's talk a little bit about those. So you can get these sanding drums, as they're called, and these sanding bands are replaceable, that you can get in pretty large quantities because they wear out pretty quickly, that you add to the drum. To do this, there's a screw on top, and you can use a screwdriver or the wrench that comes with it to unscrew that to loosen the tension. And then the band fits on top of it, you tighten it back, and then it's ready to go. So I'm actually going to do this with it on the Dremel. So, and again, it's unplugged. So go ahead and put this in, tighten it down. let's just pick one of these sanding bands. I'll fit this one over it, tighten it down. Okay, so that's ready to go, and now we'll just plug it in. I'm just going to demo quickly on this piece of scrap wood, just basic sanding. And when you're sanding, it's always a good idea to have a mask of some sort on. Something like an N95 or a respirator is probably better, but I'll just wear this one for this demo. Okay. Okay, and that was a coarser grit sandpaper, so it removed a lot more material, but if I had used something like this finer grit for finishing work, it would have been a more smoother finish. So let me unplug this. Let me talk a little bit now about the carving bit that I have. Again, these come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes. I don't do wood carving or woodworking, so to speak. But just for demonstration purposes, I do have this one. Some people, you can buy a separate attachment. It's called a flexible shaft. It's like a little handheld pen almost that does what this does, but you hang the motor on something separately, and then you use the little handheld piece so you can do more intricate work that way. And a lot of people like that for carving, detail work. But for my purposes today, I'm just going to just hold this in my hand and show you, just so you can see. Tighten that, plug it back in. Yeah, not exactly a masterpiece, is it? But the sky's really the limit. So if you get really skilled at this, if this is a hobby that you want, the Dremel is a really cool tool to use for wood carving work. And you can also, there's bits for carving, or etching, I should say, glass, which a lot of people like to do. Again, that's not really something that I've pursued very much, but that just goes to show kind of the hobby applications for the Dremel, in addition to things like home improvement and repair. A lot of hobbyists like it for those types of applications. So I hope this video has shown you just how versatile the Dremel rotary tool can be. And again, while it's certainly not a substitute for its larger counterparts, it can do many things that they can't do on a much smaller scale, regardless of which brand you decide to go with. So whether you're working on a home improvement project or a craft like this pegboard game, the possibilities are endless. Thank you.